Hey there. Normally I begin the episodes with a call to actions, related to money, like the Patreon of the store, stuff like that. But I want to let you know there is a way to help out the show that's even easier and cheaper than that, which is to go and spread the word. We do not pay to advertise the show whatsoever, pretty much. Like a lot of other podcasts, we get by on word of mouth. So if you have a social media presence, or if you have a blog, or you post on message boards, and it becomes clear that there is an appropriate time to help promote the show, just say, hey, there's this podcast about these books that I like, and I hope that you enjoy it too, etc., and on down the line. I'm presuming you enjoy the show. That is an unfair assumption to make. Makes a huge difference for us, helps it grow, helps the network grow, and I really appreciate everybody who has taken the time to do so already. Let's get to the show. Welcome to Radio Free Midworld, a podcast about the Dark Tower series of books. I'm your host, Kole Ross, and I am joined today by two people. We have Autumn Greer.
Delighted to be here.
And we have Evan Jones Thorne.
Similarly delighted.
Yeah. Rolling with a quorum of 3 due to some scheduling problems, but I'm perfectly happy with this because both Evan and Autumn, two contributors who have been here for a while, and we have some amazing source material to pull from, talking about the Prisoner, the second part of The Prisoner, specifically 2 chapters dealing with Eddie Dean, our new friend, question mark. Those 2 chapters being The Tower and Showdown and Shootout. Very action-packed, very dense chapters. Lots of dialogue, lots of people getting them parts of themselves turned into fine red mist.
Yeah, this one gets real weird pretty quickly.
It's a lot of hands and butts and a lot of lots of heads blowing up.
Yeah, it ends up making what we saw in Tull look really weak. Like, oh yeah, some people got shot, whatever.
Yeah, it's just like a line of women and children all running at you, and there was a dude crucified on the ceiling. Yeah, about that.
Without stepping on your toes, Cole, I feel like it's very, very fitting that this episode begins with Eddie sitting in a chair in his underpants surrounded by strange men.
Yeah, he's Eddie is the Bryan Cranston of Dark Tower characters. He kind of always ends up in his underwear or less, something like that, mostly naked. This whole thing, even more so than the last leg that we talked about with Eddie, where he was trapped in a very kind of impossible situation, trying to talk his way out of things. Even more so than that, like the stakes are raised up infinitely. And when we talk about him being, pinned into an airplane bathroom at the end of last episode, we're talking about the stakes being kind of nuts. What made the two of you want to kind of sign on for this particular section?
I think for me, this is like the ultimate shoot 'em up kind of, like, we touch a little bit on the mafia. It's a good old fashioned almost police procedural. This is, I think, one of the sections that's going to, if they do ever make a literal film adaptation of it, this is going to be a fun couple of episodes to watch.
I agree.
Yeah.
Evan, how about you?
It's, the entire Eddie section is just kind of crazy, and I really enjoy Eddie as a character. I kind of mentioned last time, and I really was excited about the idea of kind of seeing his introduction through, and especially because of just how strange and upsetting it gets at the end.
Yeah, and that's going to bleed over into the beginning of the next episode just a little bit. But the way that we leave this section of getting Eddie kind of into Roland's world, it leaves a lot unresolved. And boy, I just have so much sympathy for him.
I think what's really cool about this is kind of the juxtaposition, because we've seen Roland being Mr. Cool Cucumber throughout the entire series so far. And Eddie's cool too. He's just cool in the complete opposite way. I mean, he's sitting there in a bathroom on a plane, like the stewardesses, the captain, everyone's over there, and he's cracking jokes about his penis size. I mean, he's cutting up. Yeah. Eddie's just fun.
Yep. So let's get right to it. So I alluded to this last time, but the previous episode, we began the book with Roland on a beach getting his hand munched to bits by lobstrosities. If I say lobster, I have to put $1 in a jar. Oh, shit, I've got to do it now. In the lobster jar. They're always lobstrosities from now on. Roland...
I think I missed something. Is that did you get in trouble on the Slack or something?
No, at the end of the last episode, I accidentally said lobster instead of lobstrosity, which I have to agree with whoever called me out. Cannot stand.
That's a fair point.
So, we're just gonna have to deal with that. But so kind of poisoned, infected, delirious, starving, dying of thirst, etc. He wanders up and finds a door into Eddie Dean's head on a plane, smuggling cocaine, not intentionally rhyming there. And we left as Eddie was being hauled away to customs for carrying cocaine that he's not actually carrying anymore. And yeah, you kind of set it up. We begin with him in this room, kind of on the edge of getting the shakes or the jitters, whatever happens when you are entering heroin withdrawal. Eddie wanted to jitter and jive. Eddie wanted to hop and bop, as these smoking guys are just real dicks to him.
I thought there was a great line in there where they were talking about how, obviously we have Eddie, the drug addict, but he says that these guys are junkies too, but their drug is busting criminals.
Yeah, their junk is people like me or something like that. Yeah.
And I have to say, pretty much everything I know about drug use that I didn't get from something like Trainspotting or a movie like that, I pretty much got from this book. I mean, I'm like, okay, great. Junkies shouldn't shoot up next to their solar plexus. That's not a great idea. Yeah. Oh, by my testicles. That's a great place for me to shoot up if I think I'm going to maybe get interrogated.
Yep. It's just little life hacks, little words to the wise.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I just it probably it was a very informative text. Yeah. It's in a depressing kind of way, but like they go through all of this, and like Eddie is able to, like, I don't know, he's kind of like what is that move in football? Tell me about football, please. A stiff arm or something like that. Like every time they come at him, he just rolls them straight away.
And you see the blueprint for like Jack Bauer on 24 or something, like when that one guy gets in his face like, I'm sick of punks like you getting lawyers. I mean, like if they could like pull a lamp apart and shock him, that they'd be doing it. Yeah. Just like 24.
Yeah, these guys, not an awful lot of regard for the Constitution. I'll stick my lawyer in you. That crap makes me want to puke. Like, I don't know, man. It's kind of the way we run things here.
Well, I don't know. It's hitting a little close to home right now.
I mean, that I was about to go there, but yes, that is true. Hey, just kind of the way we do things.
Not my
now.
Podcast network. I can't get in trouble.
Yeah, lots of stuff is in question. But yeah, they reach into Eddie like he's a Christmas stocking. This line, oh my gosh, if a prostate check is an exam, that was a motherfucking safari. I was scared to look down. I thought I'd see that guy's fingernail sticking out of my cock. Like, this guy's great.
It just reminds me that I probably don't want to smuggle any drugs anytime soon.
No, no, it's
yeah, that's kind of my constant takeaway every time I read this chapter.
but again, like I don't tend to have an awful lot of sympathy for these guys because they're kind of giving them the runaround. But like they are dealing with an impossibility, right? And Eddie has to try and talk his way out of an impossibility while also suffering from heroin withdrawal, or at least the early stages of it, and knowing that the fact that he got popped means that he is in a world of shit, even if he does get out.
He's lucky that he didn't get, like, there's one line in there about what I didn't get from Miami Vice, I got from the Reader's Digest. And I mean, he's lucky he didn't get jacked in the jaw right there, right?
Yep.
like somebody's supervisor is going to have to come in and pull him off of Eddie right there. Because if I were an officer and I was trying to shake this guy down, oh my gosh, I would lose it right there. And I'm a really nice person.
Yeah. You just start wailing on a 21-year-old kid, a child, Autumn. Yeah. Yeah. So he's got them stumped, Well, they say, all right, well... what he does to actually get them off of his tail, I forgot to take a note of this. What he tells him is, hey, I want you guys to all, if you come in here and take my blood, you're all going to have to be tested for the same thing. Like, again,
I love that part.
This kind of, it's a little bit of a juvenile understanding of the way that works. But like,
I think that's a chess move, right? Like the Gary Kasparov pee in a cup defense.
What?
Like the opening move. Like, I mean, that's a pretty good strategy, right? Like, we'll just keep that in mind. Like, if anyone ever says, Autumn, we want a drug test, I'll be like, well, you take a drug test too. Just everybody in the room, the building.
I said the way you phrase that, the Gary Kasparov pee in a cup maneuver.
I'm sure that's a chess move, right? There's a lot of chess moves. They all have funny names.
There are more chess moves than there are stars in the sky or atoms in the universe or something crazy like that.
There's the Queen's Gambit and there's the pee in the cup.
Yeah, the way you said that made me think that Kasparov was known for peeing in a cup at the at the table, just because he was that focused and dedicated.
I'm sure they drug test all those like chess grandmasters,
But they've got to all be hopped up on like experimental
like performance enhancing
right?
drugs. Like everybody's all roided up there, like hitting the clock really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Little known fact though, Kasparov he would pee in a cup at the table, but it wasn't because of dedication. He was just kind of a freak that way.
Right. I mean, yeah, there's something. There's a really cool Radio Lab about that. I think it was a Radio Lab. Something about the book and about how it kind of without fail, people who get really, really into high level chess play kind of lose their minds because they have to keep all that stuff in their head. Who knows? It could have been some Radio Lab fluff, but yeah, Eddie gets out and, he's got people from the mafia coming after him, tailing him. He's got, he's pretty sure DEA. And also he has this door kind of following him around like a puppy.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. I thought one thing was interesting because, they're in the cab, they're being tailed, and Eddie goes back to his place in Brooklyn. But there was one place in particular, I guess he lives in Co-op City. And when I read it again this time, that name kind of stuck in my head, and I was like, why do I know this? It's kind of a weird piece of trivia, but the Son of Sam killer, David Berkowitz, also was from Co-op City and was probably living there for a couple years of overlap with the time that Eddie was there.
Huh.
Because it's Eddie's time in 1987, and I couldn't find any crimes or anything that were big news that happened then, but the big crime that happened in Jake's year in 1977 was the Kitty Genovese thing, the bystander effect thing. But and then also the Son of Sam thing would have been kind of more in Jake's time as well. It was just interesting that, I don't know, just another guy with two famous murders were kind of in that Co-op City Bronx area in times that we see in the book. And I couldn't find anything in 1987 besides Stephen King releasing like 3 novels at once.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this might
be
a
crime.
I need to reread my copy of On Writing for a lot of reasons. I need to figure out exactly when he was the most depraved with his alcohol and drug use, because like he was so prolific in this era from like the mid 80s through the mid 90s that I kind of pin it there, but I'm not exactly sure when he got sober.
And this 1 year that Eddie's in, because I looked it up, it was Eyes of the Dragon, which we talked about before, Misery, and then The Dark Half, all in 1 year he knocked out.
Jesus. Yeah, I'm jealous of the man's output. But you say, hey, maybe Berkowitz, that was the Son of Sam guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe Berkowitz was there. Well, Berkowitz was in the Co-op City that's in the Bronx. This is in Brooklyn.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, that's
is that a spoiler?
That's not a spoiler. It's just something. Let's
an interesting piece of trivia.
Let's call it a disparity that people might want to remember for more reasons than just the association with the Son of Sam. Is it Son of Sam or Summer of Sam? I think Son of Sam is a Seinfeld thing.
I think he was very busy in A Summer, though.
Yeah. I can't tell where the Seinfeld ends and the
This
Realistic
is the hard
ends.
part about being born in the 80s is sometimes your cultural literacy, it's almost there.
Yeah, you get it like
You're so close.
You get it third hand from reruns.
Yeah.
Yeah. They get back there, and then, oh boy, here we are. We have a pizza truck coming up. Something bad's going to happen. But let's get a flashback to what's happening on the other side of that door.
And now that I know that there's a jar for it, we got to be really careful what we say. With some lobstrosities.
Yes, the lobstrosities crawling up and data chicking and data chumming over Roland's body as he kind of crawls away. And we get another one of these delightful interactions between Roland and the artifacts of our world. It's basically the first Thor movie up in this piece because
that's a really good comparison. I hadn't thought of that.
Or just like any of those, like what was that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where he was like it was Hercules in modern day or something like that. Yeah, isn't that most Arnold Schwarzenegger movies? I think so. Yeah, or your Jungle to Jungle, or your Jungle to Jungle 2, back to the jungle.
Too Jungle, Too Furious.
Yes, that's where they couldn't get Tim Allen for that one, but they got French Stewart on it. It was fine.
Close enough.
Yeah, but Eddie, thinking, hey, this guy's in a bad way, gets him some aspirin, which Roland calls Aston, and also some good old-fashioned American hot dogs and Pepsi.
There's a line in there that cracked me up, because I think Roland literally says to Eddie, put the Aston on the meat things. And I'm someone that personally, I love to cook. And I can tell you that about 80% of cooking is putting Aston on meat things. I mean, that is it right there.
Yeah.
Like in a nutshell, like Escoffier, Aston on meat things.
Yeah, he found it.
Yeah.
There's an elemental truth.
I funny enough, actually had kind of the same reaction reading through it this time, and I haven't really caught that before. I've always just thought it was kind of a funny throwaway line, but yeah, it's. That is much of the creative process in general, I think.
Yeah.
Putting Aston on meat things.
Well, it's the synthesis. It's the collision between Aston and meat things, and it's the collision between the Aston, this magic and or medicine, this Pepsi, which is way too sweet and probably does as much to help him as anything, and these gutter leavings that he calls the meat things, the popkins. He does not relish the idea of eating dog.
I thought it was really weird that it was Pepsi and not Coca-Cola. Like, I feel like if Roland had stayed there for another 5 years, he would have been like me when I go to Taco Bell, like, oh, only Pepsi products? Yeah. Oh, okay, I guess. I'll just have a bottle of water.
See, it's pretty funny because for a certain period of time, they ask, hey, well, would Pepsi be okay? You're like, well, whatever. And then and eventually the answer becomes no.
Yeah. If we had just got to see Roland stay a little longer, we could have seen him get all snobby, like, I don't want that meat thing. Ugh.
Is that a Hebrew national meat thing?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry. Well, this Coca-Cola, this is the Mexican stuff, right? I need that pure cane.
Exactly. Nothing goes with a popkin like an ice cold Coca-Cola.
Yeah, from Magus.
I don't know if this is interesting or not, but so feel free to cut it if it's a really stupid, pointless story. But
have you listened to the show?
Yeah,
that's why I say I'm not sure. That's why I'm going for it anyway.
Go for it, man.
I worked at a restaurant for a long time that had Pepsi products, and I'd always get mildly annoyed as a server if somebody asked for a Coke. I'd say, "Is Pepsi okay?" and they'd say no. But now, not that long later, I've totally become that person because I'm one of those sorts that goes for the 0-calorie sodas, and Pepsi replaced the artificial sweetener in all of their no-calorie sodas with sucralose, which is Splenda, and that basically, if I have like a soda's worth of Splenda, it makes my cholesterol for some reason roughly triple.
Jesus.
Yeah. And that's like some people just you can't do that. And so now I go to restaurants, it's like, oh, can I have a Diet Coke? Is Diet Pepsi okay?
Actually, no. Yeah.
I didn't think about that. If Roland spends 5 years in our world, because he's so lean and spare and chiseled, he's probably going to be like all of us and just, like put on like maybe like 15, 20 pounds pretty quickly. So he probably will be asking for Coca-Cola products like, hey, guys, come on.
Please.
Roland's trying to lose a pound and not just from my fingers like before.
Yeah. He doesn't have many more finger pounds to give up.
Exactly. He's like, I'll take a Diet Coke, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just picturing Roland played by young Clint Eastwood in the Ben Stiller's makeup from the end of Dodgeball.
Yeah, that'd do it. Well, as bizarre as this seems to us that it's a Pepsi, remember this is the 1980s, and that was when that was when all of this was all the Pepsi mania, the Pepsi generation had swept the world, precisely because of what Roland likes about this, which is there is so much sugar in here that he believes the priest of customs should outlaw it. Again, getting back to I know that we're like dwelling on on this kind of just the funny way that King writes these kind of collisions or interactions between the Aston and the meat thing, but I don't know. It's good for a cheap laugh, I think.
Eventually what's funny about New York City is eventually a priest of customs stops letting you buy giant Pepsis, right? Like, didn't they have the drink size laws and things like that, some regulations, so you couldn't have super jumbo extra large Pepsis?
Yeah, the good man comes in. Acts like he knows what's good for you. but yeah, this revives him, and he's not sure if it's the aspirin or the sugar in the Pepsi that kind of gives him a new lease on life. So he goes from he goes from being near comatose to eventually, we're going to see here in probably 20 minutes of story time, being ready to just completely just tear through some people. But Roland has some reservations about Eddie in his mind. Like, again, we get this whole thing of people speaking to you through, in your mind, either through memory or through these doors or any number of ways. Court speaks to him and says, hey, Eddie's a weak vessel. The reason they took him is neither false nor base. They're stealing him. I dispute it not. But hey, he's like hacks. Don't make the mistake of putting your heart near his hand. So this is probably Roland talking through Court's voice to himself, trying to tell him not to get close to Eddie like he did to Jake.
And there's a line, I don't know if it's in here or maybe a few pages later, where Eddie's kind of thinking about Roland, and he's like, I suspect that in time I could love him like I love my brother. Mm-hmm. These guys, like in the quartet, fall in love like I did in junior high school. Like, oh my gosh, Eddie talked to me for 10 minutes. I bet we're going to get married. Like.
Yeah, I had a note about that exact line too, and it kind of gave me the the junior high fall in love sort of vibe. But more than that, it really struck me that Henry, as Eddie's standard for loving another human, mm-hmm. just how messed up and dysfunctional their relationship was. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of feel like there's some very interesting connotations with where the series goes with Roland's and Eddie's relationship. And I'm trying to measure my words so that I don't get too far ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
I feel like Stephen King rather really loves his screw ups. If you can tell from his writing that he respects his Rolands, or like if we're talking about The Stand, his Stu Redmonds, mm-hmm. but he loves his funny screw ups like Eddie or like Larry Underwood in The Stand. Like, he's got a deep affection for these guys. I mean, you can tell he loves to write them. He loves to put jokes in their mouths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also like they seem to serve. I know he mentioned this last episode, I think, but they seem to serve a very good kind of outsider, almost a reader stand-in role. Almost mm-hmm. like the fast talking one, the incredulous one always falls into like the role of the reader in the writer's mind. And so like they serve as a good mouthpiece, specifically Eddie does, for like how crazy this stuff, the things that are going on are. And so, like what Eddie says, Stephen King assumes that either we think or he wants us to think.
That's great that the funny character is all of the readers like Mary Sue, because that's the thing is like everybody, even if they're not funny, everybody thinks that they're funny.
Oh yeah.
Like everybody thinks deep down, man, I am so funny.
Yep. Some people start podcasts about it. Yeah. on the back of that misguided notion. But yeah, there's definitely a streak of codependence in Eddie, and again, it's that notion of, hey, if I fell in love with him, or I could come to love with him. Kind of roll my eyes at that a little bit, like it feels a little bit either too pat, or like it's using a very strong word when a more precise one probably. Here I am giving like backseat writing it or whatever, but it's like that could be less ambiguous, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. But, there we go. They're both kind of at arm's length at the moment as we snap back to present, and we're introduced to these kind of two mobster characters, Cole Vincent and Jack Double Ugly Andolini, who kind of take Eddie in with his passenger.
This is where we get into the sweet mobster aspect of it. It really is fun. Like, these are just the most well realized, like just like stock mafioso kind of characters. Like, I mean, it's like you're watching Goodfellas.
Yeah, I always kind of find myself wishing that this section was a little bit longer, or that these characters were spread out over more of the chapter.
Yeah. They're a little, I kind of wish they weren't coded so heavily like Italian-American mafia kind of thing. Like, I understand it's New York, it's the 80s. I can't help but read these as like a combination of, like Fat Tony's Mafia and The Simpsons, and the Don Botts Mafia and Futurama a little bit.
I think there's like a line in there about a mustache Pete, which was a term I had never heard, and I had to look up.
Is it a thing?
Apparently a mustache Pete is what everybody, like if you watch Boardwalk Empire or anything like that, it's what all the young guys like Lucky Luciano called the old mafiosos that didn't want to do anything different and get into the heroin game and stuff like that. Like, oh yeah, all these mustache Petes. And Stephen King seems to have this encyclopedic knowledge of all of these, if they're not racial slurs or things like that. I mean, he's got a really deep well of terms that I often have to look up, and I won't be repeating any of them on this podcast, but my dude knows some really dated terms. Yeah, that seems like a product of somebody who was really tuned into a particular kind of trashy media in a very particular time and place in America. That's what I think, is he must have read all these old pulp novels from the like 40s, 50s, or earlier or anything. Certainly not what I read in my senior English class, because I'm like, what does that mean? Good old Google.
Yeah, I had no idea what a mustache Pete was. The way he used it to describe Balazar later on, because all these guys are funny caricatures. The way he used it to describe him is more like his physical appearance. The fact that he's, just kind of like real stocky, like he comes from kind of like a peasant line almost. Mm-hmm.
And I think from the get-go when we talk about these guys, like you can tell that Eddie, he really is too smart to be hanging out with these guys.
Oh yeah.
Like, and you see how his brother pulled him into it, because his brother is, he's not doing well.
No, we get a little cutaway of this. So, again, we have this kind of parallel action going on. Henry is on the nod in the back room of this place with the gentleman in quotes playing Trivial Pursuit, but in his stupor, he keeps answering Johnny Cash to all the questions. So I said, hey, you can't say Johnny Cash to everything. Henry says, Johnny Cash is everything.
And like the guys are cracking up. Like he's just as funny as Eddie, but not in a way like Eddie where everyone's laughing with him. You know?
Right.
Yeah. This scene always kind of reminded me of, obviously the gentlemen are being mean-spirited with it, but the scene's always kind of bummed me out, because it always reminded me of in college when there'd be somebody who maybe hadn't really had much experience with alcohol or whatever would get carried away, and people would just kind of have a good time at their expense instead of facilitating a good time for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just something, like, I was fortunate enough to, for the most part, avoid that sort of thing, but that sort of thing always bummed me out. And this whole scene, and especially with how south it goes, how abruptly it goes there, it's a very off-putting, like, subplot.
It's really dark in a queasy way, because we know at the beginning that he dies. We know the kind of means of his death. You know, like, oh, he took his last rocket, right? Like, these guys are keeping him shot up, you know, so he doesn't, you know, get up and try and do anything. Like, hey, we'll keep you fixed, you know, to the point where you're debilitated until we figure out what's going on with your brother. And just like, we just know, like, hey, any of this could be the last. So while it's being played kind of for comedy, right? Like, this is a farcical situation. Like, this is bad news.
Yeah. I think there's one line in there where he mentions how Henry's so often on the nod nowadays that he always has, like, holes in his shirt from cigarette burns, which is kind of writer shorthand for, it's not good. Like, there's not a time that anyone, like, falls asleep with a cigarette, that they're, you know, on top of their life and like, oh, I was just doing taxes at H&R Block and I just fell asleep and, you know, put a cigarette burn in my tax return.
It's worth paying a little bit extra to have Jim down at the HR Block do my 1040 EZ.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're not like, man, I was doing some charity work. And oop, I just nodded off and burned a hole in my shirt.
Yeah. And like Eddie, you know, the roles have switched, right? Henry had made such a big deal into kind of henpecking Eddie into sticking around, saying, oh, I took so much care of you. You know, the only reason you're alive is because I made sure you didn't die like our little sister. Now the roles have changed, but Eddie doesn't realize it just yet. Like, he tells Henry, hey, it's like you're looking for a room to die in, you know?
But Balazar's got a real good handle on exactly where everybody is.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, Balazar's smart too. You know, he's got a real sense for this whole, you know, doing illegal things for money business. But yeah, Balazar, he's this big guy, and he knows, hey, never trust a junkie. And they really lean into, again, the symbolism, because Balazar's primary avocation is building houses of cards or card towers on his desk, which in a book called The Drawing of the Three, where people are represented by tarot cards and also they're going after a tower, is a little bit on the nose.
Yeah, you don't need to be an English major to see the symbolism in all this.
Yeah.
Huh. He's building a tower, and anything could tear it down at any moment.
Yeah.
Huh.
And, like, especially when he starts, like, waxing poetic exactly about that. Like, sometimes the tower falls for a reason. Sometimes the tower falls for nothing, or it doesn't fall for it. And King even says, like, about the guy who he's explaining this to, like, if he had the words for it, he would say, oh gosh, he would say, oh, this tower of cards explain the stars themselves, or something.
Yeah,
like that.
Our lives are like these things that I build.
Yep. Which
he straight up says Carlo Chimidretto thought this the most profound statement of the human condition he had ever heard.
Yeah.
Which is a great line for an author to put in. Man, and this last chapter was the best thing that has ever been written.
Okay, so backing off of that, it is a really dumb thing. I also like the idea of this kind of like English 101, just like really like, you know, laying it on thick. That, like,
I'm not saying I wasn't moved by it. I was moved. I was like, this is really great.
But like we recognize it as cheesy, and maybe it plays out like, okay, Balazar has a little bit of a grasp on this, but like it's real small potatoes. The fact that people around him are entranced by it says more about them than it does about him.
I haven't reread this series in a while, so I'll have to put a note in my head. There was one moment where he says that the tower was 9 levels high before it collapsed, the one time that he was building the best tower that he had ever built.
Oh, yeah?
So I made a little note to myself in my head. I'm like, okay, find out if that ever comes up again in the books.
Yeah, we are before the age of 19 at this point. So, 9. Again, you can get lost looking at these numbers. But the pizza truck arrives, and Roland sees the sign, glowing this tower, and in his in his delirium and obsession, starts reciting the names of his fallen friends and saying, we found it, on this shittily animated neon sign.
What a bummerino, huh?
Yeah.
Poor Roland. Like, you're like, wow, I had that weird thing with Walter in the desert, and I lost 10 years of my life, but the tower's right here. Great day.
So, Eddie says, oh, it's like the one in Pisa. Don't worry. And then they go in. And this actually shows, yes, Henry does die here. He dies by taking the last rocket. He died 5 minutes before anybody got there. And so this kind of plays out like I think the last word that Henry says is Walter Brennan, because they're goading him on, saying, hey, again, playing Trivial Pursuit, who is this country singer known for Folsom Prison Blues, et cetera, leading him into it. He says Walter Brennan, the famous actor. And then he passes away. Easy peasy, beautiful cover girl. So you have this kind of funny, comedy movie kind of thing where like eventually they're trying to like cut in as Balazar is doing stuff like, hey boss, hey boss, I would really think, and then nothing.
Again, this is going to make the best couple episodes of a series or the best scene in the movie.
Yep.
Yeah, it's going to be really intense.
Yeah. I really hope they haven't given up on the idea of doing some of the stuff as a miniseries. Well, I guess they haven't, right? Because they're doing Wizard and Glass as a miniseries.
Yeah, that was last I heard that was still going ahead.
Yeah. I just when I got the notion that they were doing the books as like alternating movies and series, like the series would actually work really well like that. Like, hey, movie of the Gunslinger, series where we introduce the new characters. Wasteland is obviously a thing. So just basically all the even books seem like they would have a better treatment, like serialized like that.
That's a fair point. That's interesting about the even numbers too.
Yeah. But yeah, and then Eddie gets in and has a confrontation with Balazar, where again it's like a mirror version of the DEA interrogation. So, what do you guys think about the way that Eddie and Balazar kind of interact, that kind of mirroring of the DEA thing?
I love how sharp Balazar is, because obviously he's a scholar of men, and with everything that he can see Eddie's saying, he's like, this guy is telling the truth. But there's just no way that what Eddie's saying, like, yeah, I'm just going to go in this room. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to come out with like some pounds of drugs. No big deal. And it's the same thing, like you said, that we saw with the DEA agents, where it's just the impossibility of it with regard to how this guy is acting. Mm-hmm. It's just impossible for him to reconcile.
Yeah, they notice that like he's listening to people who aren't there as he's as he's going about this, because like he is conferring with Roland in his head while this is while this is going on, and Balazar with his fascination with cards is like, hey, this is like a magic trick. How are you going to pull this 2 pounds of cocaine out of your hat?
Yeah.
So the way this ends up working out is, Eddie wants to go into the bathroom alone so he can reach through the door, get the coke and bring it out. And then, hey, we get Henry back and everybody's A-okay. But Balazar, he has no idea what's up, but he knows something is up. So he demands that Eddie strip, get another rectal exam. After which go ahead.
One of the less pleasant short descriptions in the book.
This was a much rougher rectal exam. I guess you do want to have the police do it as opposed to a mafioso, huh?
Yeah. There would be a little bit more, courtesy associated with the other one, or at least professional cleanliness standards. Like after this one is done, Balazar sends, I think it's Jack Andolini's brother, to the kitchen to wash off. No, don't cross-contaminate the kitchen. You monsters. Yeah.
This was before New York City had those A, B, C, D, and E, F ratings, like on all the hygiene in the back, like the pizza place, like now would probably get an F or a D, but back then they were like, hey, it's pizza, whatever. It's hot, it's fine.
Yeah, if somebody challenge you, they just say, hey, it's New York.
Exactly. We all have hepatitis A.
Yeah, I really wish that my wife Jessica could be on here just to kind of talk about New York, because she went there a few months ago for work, and pretty much hated it completely, very much the entire time. And I kind of feel like she could speak to the but this is New York sort of aspect of this chapter.
So this is very specifically like a pre-Giuliani, like, oh, they turned Times Square into Disneyland style New York. So obviously it's the rougher and grittier one. Man, there are a lot of like media tropes about New York that I just do not like. I think they even they comment on that later, because New York kind of features heavily. This is the second or third time we've gone there so far in the story, and it's not going to stop happening. So we're kind of stuck with this, and we're stuck with like these almost like postcard versions of stuff that happens there.
Speaking of that, there was a line in there when I think it was right after Roland saw the tower where he was like, "Oh gosh," and Eddie was telling him, "Be cool, just be cool." And it reminded me so much of Pulp Fiction. Like, what is Fonzie like, Roland? He's cool. Just be cool.
I know not this Fonzie you speak of. Is he a lord of your barony? Yes,
Lord Fonzo. From Midworld.
Hey. That was dumb. Don't reword that. But yeah, so we have Eddie naked in the bathroom, Henry dead in the other room, people afraid to say, Jack Andolini standing in the bathroom with him. As we enter a very prolonged and very intense section of the book, knowing that Eddie can't go through the door without Andolini catching wise, change of plans, Roland comes forward in what is an amazing, like, short 2-sentence kind of description of what happened. Like, the smile turned into a snarl and his eyes turned blue as he screamed, "Now, Eddie," in a voice that wasn't his own. So good.
That is specifically what I'm looking forward to seeing on screen.
There's a lot of things about the way that this is like written. Like, I think at the beginning of this section that we're talking about, there was a thing where Roland shoved his fist into Eddie's sleeve, but then he turns and he's holding the jacket for Eddie to get into. I mean, I think that the CGI they could do for this would be fun.
Oh yeah. Oh, just where they're dressing each other as they're sharing a body. Yeah.
The way that you said that sounds very erotic, and I'm hoping it's not that erotic. But
right, just
I'm thinking more light and fun.
Oh,
just two bros sharing a body and dressing each other. No big deal.
You just described the plot to the Farrelly Brothers movie Stuck on You. I think Matt Damon was in that. That's very weird to me. So now they've dragged Andolini onto the beach, and this is where things get really, really grisly in a way that descriptions of hands up butts haven't been so far in this chapter. Those are pretty grisly, but they are not a person standing there with the stump of a hand and nothing above the face except nothing above their neck except a wide open black hole where their mouth was.
We kind of missed an opportunity here as well, because, if you think about it, they could have just lured the lobstrosities up on the beach, and it could have been like Gremlins 2 when the gremlins are all loose in New York City. Like, the lobstrosities are eating pizza, they're like swinging from chandeliers. I mean, like, Muppets Take, or Lobstrosities Take Manhattan would have been a great interlude,
It's a lobster evolution.
A lobster revolution. But yeah, like, wow, did you feed the lobstrosities after midnight? Uh-oh.
I mean, they feed all the time. They're fucking monsters.
There's the pretty lady lobstrosity.
There's the lobstrosity made out of
wearing
electricity.
Lipstick.
ends up marrying Balazar at the end. It's a living.
Missed opportunity.
Man, I really love that BuzzFeed list, Disney princesses if they were lobstrosities. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but it's
I
so
took
charming.
the test, and I'm actually Lobster Belle because I love to read.
Yeah, I'm more of a Lobster Jasmine because I'm quiet but principled. Evan, come on.
I'm trying to think of a pun, and it's just not happening.
Yeah, but we get the next best thing, because if you can't take the go ahead.
Poclahontas? That's not a thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
Poclahontas is
That's
amazing.
pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Wow, you done chopped off John Smith's fingers, Poclahontas.
Yeah.
Just skitter noises everywhere.
You can't tell me what to do, Data Chuck. Yeah. But we get the next best thing, because even though they don't take the Lobstrosities to New York, they can take the New York to the Lobstrosity with this 1 in a million shot where Roland blows up Jack Andolini's gun in his hand and coldly describes the mechanics of what happened, as Eddie says, finish him off before and then the lobsters get him. Roland's such a dick.
You mentioned the coldness. Like, there's like a really baller move in there when Roland's like, oh, there's going to be some shooting. And Eddie's like, is there? And Roland's like, oh, quite a lot of it, I think. There's some swagger right there.
Yeah. Like, we're going to have to get ready for it. But, so knowing that this is not going to pass, and they still need something from the other side, Roland reluctantly gives his gun to a reluctant Eddie. There's a great line, like, only the best had ever held this baby until today. That is, like, neither of them want this to happen. But yes, there's going to be quite a bit of shooting indeed, as Balazar himself even pulls out his .357 and the tower falls.
You guys are gonna have to dumb this down for me. Could that be a metaphor?
I think it's a simile. I'm gonna need adjudication, Evan. Which do you think?
Yeah, it's time to go to the Wikipedia page. For metaphor.
I was distracted. I was looking for a specific line, and I wasn't paying attention. What is the?
No, just when Balazar gets his weapon.
Metaphor versus simile, but
yeah. But when Balazar gets his weapon and the tower falls.
I liked at one point how snooty Roland was when he was talking about Claudio's gun, and he's like, it's a cheap little thing, not much more than a toy. Yeah. And touching it made him feel gross.
Yeah, well, like he even turns that into an own because later he ends up having to use Claudio's gun. Claudio being the guy who treated Eddie like he was a Muppet, just by saying like, oh, he took this chintzy little plastic semi-automatic and finished everybody off with it because his own gun was misfiring all the time. He's like, oh, it makes sense that I would kill a loathsome person with a loathsome weapon.
But yeah, Mr. Ivory Tower Gilead is like, oh, I mean some of us grew up on the mean streets and we don't have sandalwood handle on our pistols from our dads, Yeah,
sometimes we have to get by with a Saturday Night Special.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did you find your line, Evan?
You guys keep moving past it.
Oh.
I'm just trying to catch up now.
Yeah. We're just going to walk it back. We're like, so Eddie's sitting on a plane. And the customs agents are about to talk to him.
No, but we did get a little bit ahead of ourselves because we get out and there is this back and forth with these shots. And again we have these little snippets here like, oh, now he had no face, where there had been one, there was now nothing but a churned mess of raw flesh and the black screaming hole of a mouth. Again, that was Jack back there. And Eddie's saying like, hey, we're gonna go to war, but not before they find Balazar's stash. Which, just so you know, he's a bad guy. There's some child porn in there.
Yeah, that's like it.
He was already a bad enough guy. You didn't.
That's the thing. Like you already kind of hate Balazar. Like they didn't.
Yeah.
That was.
He buried a guy under a chicken house, like so that birds could. I mean, his words, not mine, shit on him for eternity because he knocked down a card tower. Yeah. Like, we're not just going to kill this guy. I've got a great idea. Did you do what I said? Did you bury him under a chicken house?
Yeah. So, it's, I think that magazine being back there is a bit of an extravagance, but he does have 10 packages of Keflex, which is an antibiotic they go to great pains to say. But then Eddie, upon hearing that Henry is dead, finally one of the gentlemen speaks up. He goes power sliding across the floor, guns ablazing like Jack Black and Tenacious D.
Yeah, with just one of the most epic descriptions in this entire book.
Yeah. What is it? Whizzing along the floor like some kid in a disco contest. A kid so jabbed up he didn't realize he'd left his entire John Travolta outfit, underwear included, behind. And keep in mind at this point, he is still naked as a jaybird. So this is some straight up Eastern Promises shit. Yeah.
Wow, that's a really good reference. I was sorry, it took me a second. I was like, and he's covered in tattoos of the tower that mean things.
Yep. No, like that is seriously one of my favorite action scenes of all time, and one of the reasons why I have an awful lot of affection for this as well, because like fighting naked, screaming, like Eddie's been in some pretty low points up till now, you know, shaking, suffering from heroin withdrawal. We're gonna see more of that later on. Just all of these degradations. All of these just terrible things happening to him, and now he's at his very lowest, actually with some fight in him right now, and he's doing it in the most badass way possible.
They did some foreshadowing too, because Balazar knew, and I mean Roland knew as well. Like, oh, you poke the bear with the stick, and the stick is his brother. You know, like you're like, oh, your brother, and Eddie just bristles. So I mean, it's got to be in some ways no surprise to anybody when oh, that was the straw that broke that camel's back.
Eddie slides out and he's doing his action movie stuff, and then it's a lot less dignified for everybody else, even though Eddie's the one who's naked.
Yeah,
which is kind of a strange sort of thing. But like, you know, the first person that we see after Eddie slides out, besides Eddie and Roland, is Chimi Dretto, who gets hit by Roland's shot and is basically just saying "oh geez" over and over again.
Yep. Like he doesn't realize what happened. And what's described as happening to Chimi Dretto is his guts hit the wall before the rest of them did.
Yeah.
Was that him? No, that was Claudio, I thought.
Oh yeah, maybe. Shit.
Yeah, Chimi gets hit in the chest, and then as if someone had swung a sledgehammer at a barrel.
So brutal.
And I know Roland only had misfires maybe 3 times or somewhere around there. It felt like getting punched in the chest, and I felt like it happened 1,000 times. Not in a bad way, but like, oh God, I was just instantly back on the beach with the lobstrosities everywhere, you know, and I was like, oh, misfire.
Yeah.
Oh, the wet shells. I mean, it just... That was a nice way to carry forward the most depressing intro ever.
Yeah, the misfires are such a thing for the majority of this book. Back in the previous kind of section, when he blows up Jack Andolini, like King does this thing where he has these like small little like subchapters, you know, broken up. One whole subchapter, it's just 16. This was no misfire,
which I love. Ray Bradbury does that a lot too. I think it's in the Martian Chronicles. There's a chapter, and the entirety of the chapter is, I think it's nothing much else of note happened that day or something like that. And that's the whole chapter.
His nose was unremarkable.
Yeah, it's so good. Just and you know, you don't want to see it all the time, but I'm a big fan of that as a literary device in terms of just kind of like breaking up the text and showing the passage of events and adding significance or not.
Yeah. Interrupt the pattern. It's pretty. It is very effective, especially here. But yeah, one of them, Claudio's guts hit the wall. Chimi gets his chest caved in like a barrel. Part of Balazar's shoulder disintegrates into red spray. Like, and you know, keep in mind, like during this, everybody else is firing wild. Like all of the cheap like wood paneling is being shredded off the walls. Like by the end of this, it's like the aftermath of a shootout in the game Fear or something like that. Like there's nothing left of anything. Like everything is is just destroyed. Good.
And except for the supernatural thing, I gotta extend a compliment to Balazar in this. I mean, he knew right from the get-go. He's like, get the spook. Don't worry about the little junkie. Get that guy. That guy is tough stuff right there. I mean, his instincts were all right. I mean, with Eddie telling the truth and everything, but he just never could have foreseen, there's going to be a door behind a guy, and that's where your drugs are. I mean, it's too implausible. But I mean, my dude's instincts were right.
Yeah. Situational awareness. We didn't even say that. Roland comes through. He's in Eddie's world now. Like, that door swings both ways, and even though Roland is completely starved and, dying at this point, running just on adrenaline and Pepsi sugar, he's in here doing whatever work these mafiosos don't do on themselves. So Trix Postino comes out with this wonderful Rambo machine, an M16, and accidentally shoots a guy who's about to shoot Eddie with a sawed-off shotgun.
Like you do.
Just one of the dumbest, best scenes. It's so good
because King pumps the brakes. Like, I'm not sure whose voice this is in, but like pumps a brake and like gives a filibuster about why these guns suck. Like, okay, well, one of two things is going to happen. The aim is going to pull back, and also you're going to swing from side to side. What is it? In short, only a moron or a movie star would attempt to use such a gun.
He might as well just pull out the flamethrower from Scarface, right? Like,
yep.
Yeah, I'm going to burn you. Don't stand 16 feet away from me, though.
Yeah, and then at the very end, it's Trix was screaming with the joyous hysteria of a man who has seen too many movies to be able to distinguish between what the script in his head says should be happening and what really is.
Yeah, all that he knew was that he shot and killed some people.
Yeah, and Eddie thinks of it as this perfect marvel of idiocy, which is just a really wonderful combination of words. Eddie pulled the trigger and vaporized Trix from the eyebrows up. So now we're back to, visceral horror type stuff.
Landing a bunch of headshots. Roland puts 5 in Balazar's chest.
The real casualty here is I think there was one little part where Balazar had a March of Dimes plaque or trophy, and that got all shot up, which is, I mean, that's sad, I mean, what a humanitarian. He had a March of Dimes trophy.
Oh yeah, it was like pictures of Balazar like giving
all his great humanitarian efforts.
Yeah. He was handing out trophies at the police sponsored Little League team.
Exactly. It is very Breaking Bad, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm down with the mafioso stuff about this.
I just love to support the police with some chicken and some March of Dimes.
Yep. We're going to donate. We're going to get them back on their feet. Don't worry. Yeah. So yeah, this is all the carnage. Everybody's dead. And there's a little interlude here, which is another little eye roll thing. Like it only feels effective if you read it as Roland kind of being self-aggrandizing and self-pitying at the same time, where Roland thinks to himself, like noticing the fact that Eddie is kind of coming out and displaying this act of heroism, says, here's another one ready to die for you, Roland. What great wrong did you ever do that you should inspire such terrible loyalty in so many? Roland, what did you do to be so terribly awesome?
Why am I so charismatic? What a burden. Like, what a humble. That's the original humble brag, right? Like, my feet are so tired from standing on the red carpet. Like, why do I keep inspiring terrible loyalty?
Oh, my back hurts from carrying this huge penis around.
Exactly.
Jeez. Yeah. Like, what was your guys' read on that? Did you react as strongly as I did?
Yeah, it's pretty heavy-handed, I thought.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Roland's probably the only person that could get away with saying that in the world, though, right? You're like, oh, it is a terrible burden for him. He's the only guy that doesn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess just the phrase terrible loyalty, like, that might be where my reaction was, because that's such an overblown melodramatic phrase. And it's like, that's my favorite Decemberists album.
Yeah.
But
so
it just kind of feels over the top when everything's already over the top.
Yeah. So there is a charitable read on it, which is that he does feel guilty over the situation that he has dragged this person into, but also this would have happened anyway, or something like it would have. He's here saving him. I don't know.
I think the one thing that might make the line work is we think everything's over, right? Like he's saying this and it's over. I think they mentioned that like the office, Balazar's office, is just like a ruin, but there's still one last surprise with Henry Dean, right?
Yeah, we got our buddy here. I think he's one of the Irish guys who came in like asking for something early on. Like he's one of the associates, this Kevin Blake, who says like, "Hey Eddie, catch," and then hurls Henry Dean's head out directly at Eddie.
Which I have to say, I did not remember. This is probably one of my, I usually tend to skip ahead to the Wastelands and the reread. So I was rereading this. I probably hadn't read this book in particular in a long time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, wow, well, the shoot-up's over. Looking forward to get, holy moly. I don't know why I didn't remember it, but.
I don't know either.
They throw his head.
Yeah,
they're not playing around.
It's really bad. Yeah. That's a bad thing to do.
Maybe I just fugued. Like I blocked it out and I'm like, everything's great. Now Roland has a new friend. Like,
well, then, and Eddie doesn't take it well.
No.
Not at all.
Yeah.
You think he'd be able to be a sport about this?
Yeah, like you knew your brother was dead. Come on.
Yeah. Come on. None of this is news. Big Ben.
Yeah. It's not a surprise.
Yeah. But like it's a trick, it's a gambit, and it works. Yeah. So he goes charging, and then ultimately, Roland is able to take out the ambush. But like what we're left with is Eddie dry firing his gun as though he couldn't be killed, as though this guy couldn't be killed enough. As Eddie kind of knocks Roland out for trying to get him to move along, and then just cradles his brother's head as he sits naked on the floor of this shot out building as the SWAT team is rolling in.
Yeah.
Which is, it's as a kind of a coda to this huge over the top ridiculous gunfight. That is always the image that kind of sticks with me when I'm thinking about this scene as a whole. Like not the crazy awesome action or the wonderful Rambo machine or any of that. It's that image of Eddie sitting naked holding his brother's severed head while everything falls apart around him.
Jesus.
Like that's kind of a hell of a way to end a scene on. And it's also pretty obviously like, oh, that's the Eddie is, I think it even says like Eddie, this might be getting ahead of us, but in the shuffle between chapters, Eddie was not talking to keep Henry alive. Eddie was talking to bury Henry for good.
Yeah.
And so it's, on the one hand, like I could see if people are kind of not into the heavy handedness of that particular image, but I feel like in this book, especially more than any of the books going forward, King kind of tries to swing for the fences, and when he hits, it's really, really evocative and moving and unsettling on a very base sort of level.
Yeah.
And then later he tries to swing for the fences, and it doesn't do that.
I have to say, I'm so glad that we have another little scene after this, because if we had to go right from Eddie holding his brother's severed head into our Twitter handles, that would be a heartbreaker right there. Like, tune in for the next cheerful episode.
Yep. I don't know if you'll believe it, but it's gonna get worse.
Yeah.
It's so this works for me. It's a very powerful image because we're gonna get kind of more of a sense of what happens here. But like this whole section of the book, Eddie's whole interaction with Roland has been circumstances conspiring to strip him of everything that is keeping him here, right? It is, like he is stuck in a very tangled situation. He is hooked on drugs. He has a deadbeat semi-abusive brother who, doesn't have his best interest in mind, is manipulating him, but who he, loves dearly and kind of is treating him as, it's just a fucked up relationship. And also he's in hock with the mob, and everything that we're seeing here up until this moment where he's naked and holding his dead brother's head is like, okay, there's nothing left for you here. And you could argue that Roland manipulates him. Like, he says, hey, like, there's nothing left for you, so why don't you come? I can, all I can promise you is death, but you may get to see the tower.
And I mean, he also already spent his last $5 on a meat thing and a Pepsi.
Yeah. So like, there's nothing for him, and he's in a situation where he has no choice but to say yes, almost. Yeah.
But Roland does, I mean, he does kind of, because Roland hasn't been to the tower, and he's like, oh, the tower, it's great. Oh, what if you could see this amazing, I mean, it's like saying, like, oh, you got to come to Disney World. And when you get to Disney World, like, I mean, Roland's never been to Disney World. He doesn't know what's happening. Like, he doesn't know it's like $27 for an ice cream,
he's like the kid who's telling stories about being at Disney World, but like, he's just trying to impress people.
Yeah, on Space Mountain, you literally go to space.
Yeah.
That's why they call it Space Mountain.
It's like that movie Space Camp, but it's real. Yeah. So,
but yeah, there's Eddie's kind of despondent and not wanting to go, and I feel like Roland kind of does manipulate him into going, but it's not like Eddie's on the losing end of that,
right? The police are shooting tear gas into the room as they make their exit.
Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting how at the end of this chapter, Roland refers to him as prisoner again, and you are currently a prisoner of your vices and your addictions and your dysfunctional relationship with your brother. But you can also become a very literal prisoner of the SWAT team coming in now.
And by the way, you've already had 2 cavity searches today. What do you think the SWAT team is going to do?
Well, they're going to give him a couple more cavities.
Just throwing it out there.
Eddie doesn't seem very averse to what's happening.
Hashtag tower.
So like that's where we leave it, but with one little change, as Roland is, kind of taking him through and thinking, hey, this may not be bad. Just going to read a quote here. He had seen this hag-ridden man, great turn of phrase there, behave with all the dignity of a born gunslinger in spite of his addiction, and the fact that he had been forced to fight as naked as the day he was born. He wanted Eddie to decide for himself. So like, he doesn't like drag him bodily through the door. He gives Eddie a chance to kiss Henry goodbye. But then when he's on the other side, as the door is closing, Eddie goes into a full-on panic attack about his heroin. He wants to go back and get his one last fix from the desk.
Let me just have one thing, Roland.
Yeah.
Come on, my brother's dead. Just let me have one nice day.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's and I do like the Roland wanting Eddie to decide for himself, and that kind of also goes back to the, what's on the other side of that door. If you tell me, maybe I'll go, but if you lie, I'll know it. And probably death, but before that happens, I don't think you'll be bored. And it's like, you can't ask for more honesty than that, I don't think.
That's all that Roland knows.
That was the original tagline for Disney World, right? That was what Walt Disney said.
Yeah.
Probably death, but, before that, Space Mountain. It'd be awesome.
Death awaits, but not boredom. Yeah. Death in the vacuum of space. Yeah. And so this is how we end, with Roland telling Eddie, hey, that part of your life is over. And Roland taking medicine from our world, this chieflet, the Keflex, killer cure. And now we have this to deal with. So next time, we're going to do the kind of interstitial chapter, the shuffle. where we have Eddie on the other side here, and then we're going to go up through Detta and Odetta, and then Ringing the Changes. So that'll be the first part of the Lady of Shadows section of the book, and we invite you to read along. Autumn, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me in the Radio Free Midworld chat on the Duckfeed Slack. You can also find me on Twitter at Mrs. Greer. That's MISSUS Greer.
Yep. Evan, how about you?
I am at Mr_Harder, all spelled out on Twitter and in the Duckfeed Slack, which I am not really logged into as often as I probably should be, but I'll try to be better about that.
Oh, you pop in every once in a while. It's fine. It's a big time commitment.
Yeah, it's. I think it's just that I haven't really totally learned how to effectively use Slack, and it's overwhelming and terrifying.
Yeah, there's a lot of channels, way too many actually.
Yeah, but yeah, you can find me there. You can find me on most other social networks. EvanJonesThorne.com has my kind of a general overview of what I've got going on. If you care that much about me.
Yep, and you can find me at Kole Ross on Twitter, and do a bunch of other shows at Duckfeed.tv, including a new show about the band REM that has been up for a little bit as of the time you've heard this, but I encourage you to check it out. It's called File Underwater. And for this show, the usual stuff. We love the ratings and reviews we've gotten on iTunes. People have been super nice. I've really enjoyed seeing people talk about the show on social media and message boards. So I'd love if you continue doing that. It's great. I notice because I am a vain small man who searches for that stuff kind of regularly. But most of all, continue listening. Thank you, Autumn and Evan, for joining us this time. And
thank you, Cole. And and also, if if you're not going to mention it, I will this time around. But if you aren't already, go to patreon.com/DuckFeed.tv because the people that did that in the past are the only reason that this show is happening in the present. So that's a really cool thing, and I'm really happy that I get to be a part of it. And Duckfeed is doing some really amazing stuff, and support them if you can.
Oh, well,
agree.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks both of you. So with that in mind, take care. We'll talk to you sometime in about 2 weeks. And until then, long days and pleasant nights.
And until then, you won't be bored.